Song Xiyue died in that raging fire, and after her death, her resentment persisted. She became a ghost for another 2 years. She watched as Gu Xunyuan, who was held up by the Song family in one hand, destroyed the entire Song family, and as he gradually gained glory and favor after the Song family was destroyed. She hated him so much. Opening her eyes again, she was reborn and returned to the wedding night when she married Gu Xunyuan. She knows his plan, and she can never let him succeed in this life. My husband wants to climb straight up the sky. Then destroy your climbing ladder first. Does the roommate want to be favored by herself? Then roll into the Gu family and become the lowest level concubine. Their son wants a bright future. Then, as soon as you are born, you will be given the reputation of punishing your parents and thrown into the pigsty to raise them. Song Xiyue is both talented and beautiful, kind and weak. Everyone sympathizes with her marriage, condemning the spoiled concubine of the Gu family for destroying her wife. After her husband's death, the city was flooded with powerful people who only sought the favor of beautiful women and remarried them as wives. Unexpectedly, the eldest prince Helanjun took the entire northern region and went directly to the imperial court, requesting a decree to grant marriage. Everyone accused him of being cunning and using such methods to seek Ayue. But he didn't care at all, his face full of arrogance. Ayue is also your nickname. She's called the Grand Prince Consort. Soft and weak appearance Black Lotus female lead versus paranoid and poisonous tongue love brain male lead. Chapter 1. Rebirth on Wedding Night. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The bright red wedding room looked lively and lively. The ghost Song Xiyue hovered on the beam of the house, looking bewildered at the busy crowd below. The decoration of this happy room exudes delicacy and luxury everywhere, and many clever ideas make Song Xiyue couldn't help but think of the wedding room she had at her wedding 10 years ago. Song Xiyue's ghostly eyes turned slightly red and she said, I don't know who Gu Xunyuan, that scumbag, married today. She murmured to herself, then gave a cold smile and said, with such grandeur, I'm afraid I'll marry Bai Jiaojiao. Bai Jiaojiao is the concubine of her husband Gu Xunyuan. 10 years ago, on his wedding night, Gu Xunyuan left Song Xiyue alone to guard an empty house and stayed in a small courtyard in the west of the city, warming up with Bai Jiaojiao's red candle tent, swaying the phoenix. Everyone in the Gu family knows about the existence of Bai Jiaojiao. On the day after her wedding, Mrs. Gu asked Song Xiyue to establish rules, just to cover up for Gu Xunyuan and prevent her from discovering clues when she had time to look for someone. That day, Song Xiyue was pregnant and stood under the scorching sun for 2 hours. Her trusted maid was worried about her body and begged for mercy on her behalf. However, she was accused of being bullied by evil slaves and had 10 fingers cut alive on the spot. When Gu Xunyuan returned to the mansion to learn about this matter, he not only did not make decisions for her, but also blamed her for not restraining her servants well, accusing her of crying the next day of her wedding, which was to ruin the feng shui of their Gu family. Thinking of this, Song Xiyue stared at the festive red below, feeling a surge of resentment and her ghost eyes becoming increasingly crimson. At this moment, a cool breeze suddenly rushed in from the window, blowing straight toward Song Xiyue on the beam of the house, causing her to scatter and extinguish the pair of dragon and phoenix candles. At the same time, a strong and powerful sound of footsteps came from outside. The candle of joy cannot be extinguished, go and light it quickly. The maid Qingyu was startled as she tidied up the bride's skirt and whispered to the side. Just as she finished speaking, she heard a voice coming from outside. Jasper, you can go prepare hot water now. Tonight, I need to trouble everyone to deliver more water. By the way, Ayue has been tired all day. Did you send her some food? Upon hearing this sound, the bride suddenly raised her hand and grabbed the fiery red cover, staring straight in the direction of the door. My eyes are about to crack, like a fierce ghost, it is Song Xiyue. Seeing this, Qingyu quickly approached and whispered, Miss, what's wrong with you? Song Xiyue seemed to have not heard of it, only staring at the door, her gaze gradually blurring. Gu Xunyuan, it's Gu Xunyuan. His voice, even if she was dead, every time she heard it, she couldn't bear the resentment. At the celebration banquet of the Song family army in the past, she, a young lady who was favored by the top-tier generals, accidentally fell victim to Gu Xunyuan, who was also the 7th-ranked colonel of the Song family army. She implicated the Grand General's mansion as a laughingstock and married the Gu family after 2 months of pregnancy. And he relied on the Song family and leapt to become a 5th-rank Weiyuan general. He entered the Beijing guard camp and was in charge of the city's patrol affairs, becoming a new nobleman in the capital. At that time, everyone said he had climbed the high branch, and he always kept gratitude to the Song family by his mouth. Unexpectedly, a few years later, the Song family would have a series of troubles, and Song Xiyue would also be bedridden. He immediately turned his face and mercilessly admitted Bai Jiaojiao into the mansion. In order to win the favor of Bai Jiaojiao, Gu Xunyuan personally handed over a knife and had Bai Jiaojiao break Song Xiyue's tendons, leaving only her right hand and imprisoning her in the abandoned courtyard. In order to make up for Bai Jiaojiao's years of being an extramarital affair, Gu Xunyuan personally brought in the dirtiest and most despicable beggar, hugging Bai Jiaojiao and watching Song Xiyue in the midst of filth, being repeatedly bullied for a full 3 years. They threatened her son Gu Zhili's life and did not allow her to commit suicide. But 3 years later, she told her that Gu Zhili was not her son, but from Bai Jiaojiao. That day was the apprenticeship banquet for Gu Zhili, who was accepted by the imperial teacher as a disciple of the closed door. Song Xiyue lay in a filthy environment, fantasizing that her son would soon be able to save her from water and fire. She waited from dawn to dusk, and finally received news from their family of 3 that Gu Zhili was not her child. As soon as her child was born, he was drowned by Gu Xunyuan himself. If it weren't for Emperor Shi only accepting disciples over 8 years old, do you think I would keep you for so many years? Gu Xunyuan finished telling the truth and looked at her with a smile, as if looking at a dirty and disgusting maggot. Song Xiyue, you should be grateful that you are a disciple of the imperial master. I still need you to write a recommendation letter for Zhili, otherwise you would have died 2 years ago. At that time, Song Xiyue lay in the midst of humiliation and filth, watching her son who had given everything stand not far away, looking at her with disgusted eyes. But with a face full of admiration, she hugged Bai Jiaojiao and shouted, "Mother." That night, when Bai Jiaojiao and her son lit a big fire, Gu Xunyuan laughed extremely happily and revealed all the truth. Originally, the accident at the celebration banquet was designed by them, and her lingering illness was caused by their poisoning. Not only that, they also framed their eldest brother for self-theft, framed their second brother for corruption, bought bandits, and humiliated her 2 illegitimate sisters to death. Her brave and skilled elder brother was beheaded in public, her unrestrained second brother died in prison, and her 2 younger sisters died without any corpses. Song Xiyue, your father forced the death of my stunningly talented elder brother, cutting off my hope of changing the family's family. Then I want your Song family to be wiped out, with blood in debt. Don't be afraid, your parents and grandfather will soon come to reunite with you. In the underworld, don't remember me. Jiao, I feel so happy for my husband. Ha ha ha. Mississippi. What's wrong with you? Amidst the malicious laughter, Song Xiyue vaguely heard a familiar voice. Later, someone seemed to hold her cold hand and whispered in her ear, "Uncle has already arrived at the door. Miss, can you give me the cover quickly?" This voice gradually became clear in Song Xiyue's ears, and the malicious laughter of the family of 3 before her death gradually faded from her ears. She slowly lowered her head and her gaze fell on her hand. As her eyes gradually became clearer, Song Xiyue frowned slightly, quite puzzled. Why is she holding a piece of red cloth in her hand? At this moment, the red cloth was torn a few times by something. Immediately after, the soft and gentle voice in her ear rang out again, "Miss, what's wrong with you?" Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue slowly turned her head like a puppet, looking in the direction of the sound. Immediately, she widened her eyes and grabbed the person's wrist with her backhand. Qing Yu. The tentacles are warm and soft, undoubtedly living. Didn't Qing Yu die when she was 19 years old? No, she's been a ghost for the past 2 years and can't touch anything. How could she suddenly touch a living person again? And isn't her hand broken? Miss, it's me. Qing Yu's face was full of anxiety, but she patiently coaxed in a soft voice, Miss, Uncle is coming in soon. Hurry up and cover the lid, don't let Uncle see. Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue almost instinctively let go. Uncover the head. What kind of cover is being lifted? Who's the cover to uncover? Song Xiyue looked at Qing Yu in a daze and rolled her throat with difficulty, saying, Qing Yu, how old are you this year? As the words fell, Qing Yu deftly covered her head. Upon hearing this, she leaned down slightly and said softly, Miss Hui, Qing Yu is 16 this year. Upon hearing these words, Song Xiyue suddenly clenched her fist. Qing Yu married into the Gu family with her when she was 16 years old. Can we say that this was her wedding night? Under the big red cap, she gritted her teeth tightly. Did she return to the day when she married Gu Xunyuan at the age of 15? So right now, isn't it? The wedding night when Gu Xunyuan and Bai Jiaojiao were flirting with each other outside, while she was alone guarding the empty room. Thinking of this, Song Xiyue pinched her nails into the palm of her hand, causing a piercing pain. She took a deep breath. She's reborn. Oh my goodness, she was supposed to be reborn. Gu Xunyuan had always hidden Bai Jiaojiao very well in his past life. This pair of dogs and men were the main culprits who killed the entire Gu family, and she couldn't spare any of them. Since it is a rebirth to return to this day, to find the person, tonight is the best opportunity. She needs to calm down. Uncle. Before Song Xiyue could suppress her complex emotions, the sound of Qing Yu's salute came from her side. Subsequently, a footstep stopped in front of Song Xiyue. It's Gu Xunyuan. Realizing this, Song Xiyue tightly gripped her palms with her hands under her big sleeves, her whole body trembling slightly. The overwhelming hatred surged out of her heart, and every pore of her body was clamoring, kill Gu Xunyuan. To avenge the entire Song family. Ayue, you've been wronged by marrying me. A voice of Gu Xunyuan pretending to be gentle but unable to conceal his pride came from above. Song Xiyue gritted her teeth and remained silent. She was reborn for some unknown reason, but she knew that at this moment, she could never let Gu Xunyuan discover any clues. At this moment, the voice of Qing Yu beside him sounded. Uncle, it's time to lift the lid. Chapter 2. Find Bai Jiaojiao and make things bigger. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The bright red veil fell down in response, revealing the delicate and charming face beneath it. Gu Xunyuan looked at Song Xiyue with her eyes closed, and saw that she was trembling all over, nervous and breathing rapidly. At that moment, her heart was constantly moving. She is known for her beauty, but she never wanted the bride to dress up, so beautiful that it is almost suffocating. Don't waste his calculations. This kind of beauty is about to celebrate under his body. Thinking of this, Gu Xunyuan couldn't help but feel restless. Somewhere under his navel, he immediately turned around and brought a glass of wine. Ayue, come and drink Helanjun wine with me. His voice was gentle, and his gaze toward Song Xiyue was wild and sticky. Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue slowly looked up at him without moving. In the 2 years after her death, her resentment persisted and she turned into a ghost, haunting Gu Xunyuan day and night. In those 2 years, Song Xiyue watched Gu Xunyuan crown the Song family with treason, and watched him with a killer catch up on the way to exile of the Song family, cutting his grandfather and father into human beings. Watching him instruct thieves to insult their mother and sister-in-law in front of them. Watching him deliver the eldest brother's posthumous child to Bai Jiaojiao's hands, allowing Bai Jiaojiao to scald her niece's throat with hot oil, and use mercury to peel and kill her. The Song family lost all their lives at the hands of him and Bai Jiaojiao. She wants to kill him. Mississippi. Qinyu's low voice sounded beside her, awakening Song Xiye's rationality. Then a glass of wine was handed into her hand. Uncle is waiting. Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue took a deep breath, slightly closed her eyes, suppressed her nausea, and raised her glass. She remembers it. She lost her innocence, and the Song family feared that she would be looked down upon by the Gu family. They not only promoted Gu Xunyuan to become the general of Weiyuan, but also gave him half of the Song family's tiger talisman. That half of the tiger talisman is the help of Gu Xunyuan's rising clouds, and it is also his sharp sword for calculating the Song family. She was reborn. Not only did she want to kill him, but she also wanted to bring back everything that the Song family had given him. Finding Bai Jiaojiao tonight is the beginning of everything. Thinking of this, Song Xiye's breath was unstable, and a sip of wine choked into her trachea, causing her to cough incessantly. Why drink so urgently? Gu Xunyuan quickly put down his wine glass and rubbed Song Xiye's slender back with his smooth palm. He covered it with his robe and took advantage of the situation to explore her chest. At this moment, Qinyu brought water over, and only then did he release his hand. Qinyu explained, "Uncle, Miss has been unable to handle alcohol since childhood, it's really difficult for her." Upon hearing these words, Gu Xunyuan let out a low and supported Song Xiye's shoulder, seemingly patiently waiting for her to recover. Song Xiyue detested his touch and was about to shake it off when Gu Xunyuan's personal companion Jiang Xian hurriedly appeared at the entrance of the Shifang. "General, the old lady said you have something important to come over. It's an urgent report from the military." Upon hearing this, Gu Xunyuan looked over and a hint of impatience flowed between his handsome eyebrows and eyes. After hesitating for a moment, he still stood up. After taking 2 steps, he stopped and turned back, saying, "Qinyu, take care of your wife." "General, I will come when I go." "Yes." Qinyu quickly responded. Song Xiyue supported Qinyu's hand, calmed her cough, and took a few sips of water before finally regaining her strength. "Miss, the etiquette is over, and you have been tired all day. Qinyu will serve you to wash up." Upon hearing these words, Song Xiyue smiled faintly, took off the heavy golden crown from her head, and casually threw it onto the dressing table. Upon seeing this, Qinyu thought she was unhappy and whispered, "Miss, the urgent report in the military cannot be delayed. Don't blame Uncle, he is extremely considerate of you." The jade beside her also said, "Yes, before my uncle came in, he carefully asked outside if we had ever brought some food to the young lady. It shows that we also feel sorry for the young lady and said we would come back soon." Upon hearing their words, Song Xiyue closed her eyes. What kind of military emergency report will be sent to Madame Gu? Upon hearing this, both of them pursed their lips and lowered their heads. Seeing them like this, Song Xiyue let out a silent sigh, her eyes slightly cold. In her past life, it was the same. "I hate her for losing her virginity before marriage and not daring to pursue it. Qinyu, go prepare a vegetarian dumpling and sprinkle some seasonings to send to the general." Upon hearing these words, Qinyu's hand, which was removing her bun, paused and said, "Mississippi. Sprinkling seasoning is their secret language, which means adding Mongolian sweat medicine." Song Shi did not explain and continued, "Mou, your lightness skills are the best. You are good at tracking and hiding. Follow the general and remember where he went." Moyu's eyes lit up and she immediately stood up, saying, "Yes." Qinyu finished delivering dumplings and brought back a bowl of medicine. Seeing that Song Xiyue had already taken off her makeup and changed into her sleeping clothes, she approached and whispered, "Miss, if you suspect Uncle, you can let our Song family take action. Why bother letting Mou go? If discovered by your uncle, wouldn't it affect your relationship with him?" Upon hearing these words, Song Xiyue shook her head slightly. The Song family moved out of Xinjing to help me in Gu Xunyuan, so it was inconvenient for them to intervene in Xinjing's affairs. As she spoke, she looked up at the bright moon in the sky. In order to allow Gu Xunyuan to stay in the capital and not suppress him due to the fear of the Song family's power, her grandfather and father moved out of Xinjing. After her wedding, she went to the southern border to guard the border. If there is any further action, it will harm the Song family without any benefit. It was the servant who acted hastily. Xingyu said as she brought the medicine bowl over and said, "Miss, you're also tired today. Let's take a break after drinking the anti-abortion medicine." Upon hearing these words, Song Xiyue suddenly paused and covered her lower abdomen with an ugly expression. She forgot, how could she forget? There is still Gu Xunyuan's bone and blood in her stomach. Xingyu saw that her complexion was not right, so she quickly put down the medicine bowl and helped her, saying, "But you're feeling uncomfortable again. Wow." Song Xiyue bent down and vomited in a mess. Xingyu's eyes were red, and she stroked her back as she said, "Miss, this baby was not sitting firmly, but she got married so hastily and hastily. Now my uncle still." "No problem," Song Xiyue said hoarsely in her voice. "Take out the medicine and pour it out. Give me a cup of hot water." "Yes." Half a day later, Song Xiyue stopped vomiting, rinsed her mouth, and sat on the soft couch with a pale face, one hand caressing her lower abdomen. Her face was cold and she didn't know what she was thinking. A light night's sleep. Before it was fully dawn, Song Xiyue opened her eyes. She was probably a ghost who had been around for 2 years in her previous life, but now she is a bit uncomfortable walking. After getting off the bed, she paused for a while before calling someone in to take care of her grooming. It was already Inshe when Mo returned last night. When Song Xiyue woke up, she immediately got up and told Song Xiyue what she had seen with her own eyes. As expected, Gu Xunyuan hid Bai Jiaojiao in a secluded courtyard in the west of the city. Last night, he went to worship her and enter the bridal chamber. After listening to Mou's story, Xingyu and Biyu were furious and infuriated. Song Xiyue remained very calm and said, "Have they both eaten that plate of dumplings?" Moyu nodded and said with a look of disgust, "That woman is angry and unwilling to eat. It was the general who gave it to her by mouth, but they don't find it disgusting. I'm so disgusted to see it." Xingyu angrily said on the side, "These 2 people can really eat well. They are dumplings for 5 people. I put on enough." As she spoke, she looked at Song Xiyue and said, "Miss, I've added a lot of seasoning. These 2 people can't wake up without a decisive plan every day. Let's go catch the traitor." "What's the point of catching traitors?" Song Xiyue said calmly, "It's not my Song family's face that I've lost. What she wants is to find Bai Jiaojiao, bring her into the Gu family, firmly tie her to Gu Xunyuan, and let them all perish together." Xingyu blushed and said, "Uncle became the general of Weiyuan thanks to our Song family, but he dares to let Mist suffer this injustice. It's simply ungrateful." Song Xiyue took a sip of morning tea and said, "Who said I'm going to eat this?" Upon hearing this, the 3 maids immediately perked up their ears. "Biyu, you can order a few servants who speak loudly and wait outside the Ministry of War." Mou led a few agile people to wait at the city gate. As soon as the gate opened, he left the city and went to the Jingwei camp to find Gu Xunyuan. If someone asks you where you are going and what you are doing, there is no need to hide it. It is important to let both of these people know that General Weiyuan's wedding night is nowhere to be seen and he is unaware of life and death. Chapter 3. Personnel from the Ministry of War personally visit the door. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Biyu and Moyu were full of excitement on their faces, and at the same time, they stepped back in response. After the 2 of them left, Xingyu couldn't help but say, "Miss, what about me?" Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue looked at the sky and Mrs. Gu was about to send someone to call her over and make rules. Gu Xunyuan's birth mother passed away early, and his father was a shameless drunkard. Yesterday, he got married and worshipped his grandmother in high court. In her past life, Qingyu's hands were destroyed in the hands of this devout old woman, and Song Xiyue naturally couldn't let her go. Thinking of this, Song Xiyue pulled Qingyu and said, "I'm scared alone, you have to accompany me." Upon hearing these words, Qingyu responded with a heartache and couldn't help but wipe her eyes. Her young lady has never suffered such injustice. Not long after, the maid came to pass the message, and Zhao Mama next to Lady Gu called Song Xiyue over to serve tea to the elders. Song Xiyue frowned at the mirror and said, "I won't go. The general hasn't returned yet. It's against the rules for me to serve tea to the elders alone." After sending off Zhao Mama, Song Xiyue had someone set up breakfast again. Not long after finishing her meal, Grandma Zhao came again with her people. "Young lady, the old lady has been waiting for you for a long time. As a junior, it's not good to keep the old lady waiting, is it?" As soon as Zhao Mama saw Song Xiyue, she became suspicious. "Mammy is right." Song Xiyue looked obedient and respectfully said, "But the general is not here. If I go alone to serve tea to the old lady, it's against the rules." The old lady said, "This is the rule of Xingjing City. The Gu family comes from the countryside and does not follow this death ritual." After Zhao Mama finished speaking, she looked at Song Xiyue with a warning and said, "If Madame Xiao doesn't know how to adapt and spreads the news, wouldn't it be said that the Song family looks down on the Gu family?" As the words fell, Qingyu couldn't help but warn, "Don't talk nonsense. Blue Jade." Song Xiyue called out and then looked at Zhao Mama with a faint smile, saying, "Zhao Mama, you are the servant of the old lady. Your lesson is the old lady's lesson, and I naturally want to listen to it. It's good if Madam knows." Zhao Mama snorted coldly and raised her hand, "Then please do it." Song Xiyue remained unmoved and said, "However, although I am a junior, I am also the young lady of this general's mansion. Grandma taught me a lesson today in front of the servants in the entire courtyard. Is such a wicked slave bullying the master also the intention of the old lady?" Upon hearing these words, Zhao Mama's face changed and she warned, "Young madam, be cautious. Old madam is your elder." "You're right." Song Xiyue spoke softly with a smile on her face and said, "Then please ask Grandma to stay at my Yilan courtyard and have a cup of tea." As soon as the words fell, there was no need for Song Xiyue's orders. Immediately, a martial servant approached and blocked Zhao Mama's mouth, dragging her away with ease. The people who followed Grandma Zhao were all foolish. The young lady actually dared to cheat on the old lady. Did she eat the bear's heart and leopard's gallbladder? As you all have seen, Madame Zhao has publicly tarnished the reputation of the old lady and instigated my relationship with her. I am the granddaughter of the old lady, and I am responsible for dealing with her bullying and enslavement." After speaking, Song Xiyue turned to look at Qingyu and said, "Qingyu, Grandma Zhao is getting old and needs to be carefully taken care of." "Yes." 2 flowers bloom, each representing 1 branch. The speed of causing trouble between Bu and Moyu is very fast. When the city gate first opened, the news of Gu Xunyuan's missing wedding night was already well known to everyone. At the end of the hour, the gatekeeper came to report, and Liang Zhoming, the Minister of War, came to the door. He was already waiting at the Tingsong Pavilion. Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue was somewhat surprised. Liang Zhoming was once a deputy general stationed on the border of Beicheng. 2 years ago, after the Crown Prince Helanjun took over the northern city, he was injured and returned to the capital. Nowadays, he is appointed as a third-rank official attendant and jointly oversees the major affairs of internal and external patrols of the capital with the Imperial City Department. He is now the superior of Gu Xunyuan. Pressing the question, Song Xiyue asked Qingyu, "How is Zhao Mama?" "Locked in the firewood room, waiting for the young lady to leave." Upon hearing these words, Song Xiyue nodded faintly and said, the Minister of War has come to the door. It is not appropriate for me, a newly married woman, to receive her alone. I will send someone to invite the old lady." Upon hearing this, Xiyue said speechlessly, "Miss, I don't know." The gatekeeper went to Ningshou Hall to report it from the beginning, but the old man claimed that he couldn't get sick, so he reported to Arilan Academy. Song Xiyue closed her book and said, "Follow me to invite her." "Miss, why bother going to suffer?" Xiyue advised, "You are the bride of the mansion, and it's not your turn to treat guests. Lord Liang is a general who goes to the peak, and the old lady treats Lord Liang slowly. It's not us who are at a disadvantage." After hearing these words, Song Xiyue smiled faintly and said, "How can we fall into someone's shoes? Besides, I'm still counting on Lord Liang to help me invite the Jingwei camp guard to find my husband." As she spoke, she tidied up her skirt and walked out. "You can't give the old lady a chance to wake up." Upon hearing these words, Xiyue's eyes lit up and she immediately followed suit. After leaving Yilan Academy, Song Xiyue led her servants all the way towards Ningshou Hall. As expected, from a distance, the gate of Ningshou Hall was tightly closed. Xiyue stepped forward and patted the door for a while, but only a young girl came out. "Madam, the old man has a headache and just took some medicine and fell asleep." Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue's voice was extremely gentle. "Did you tell the old lady that the Minister of War will come knocking on the door?" The little girl nodded and quickly shook her head, saying, "The old lady has fallen asleep and can't wake up." "Have you invited a doctor?" Please. Please. What did the doctor say?" The little girl was a bit flustered when asked by Song Xiyue, and her voice became lower and lower. "Big. The doctor said that the old lady needs to rest." "Bold." Xiyue scolded and stared, saying, "The Minister of War has come to our door. How dare you conceal the truth from the old lady? That's the peak of the general. Can you afford to offend him?" Upon hearing these words, the little girl was so frightened that she knelt down and kowtowed repeatedly, saying, "Young lady, calm down, young lady. Yes. It's because the old lady is missing. If the old lady says she wants to see you, go see the young lady." Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue said, "What's your name?" "As for Madame Xiao, my servant's name is Ruer." Song Xiyue nodded and said, "Ruer, your preface doesn't match the rest, I can't believe you." "Xiyue, continue knocking on the door." "Yes." As the words fell, Xiyue and the martial servant from Yilan Academy approached and began to knock on the door with a clang, while clapping and shouting to Mrs. Gu. Not long after, another maid came out of Ning Xiaotong. As soon as she came up, she saluted Song Xiyue and said, "I have seen Lady Xiao, my servant Sheer." Song Xiyue looked at her, her eyes slightly narrowed, but she didn't respond. In his past life, Sheer climbed onto Gu Xunyuan's bed several times and was caught by her, but was fiercely protected by Lady Gu. Finally, she died silently in the hands of Bai Jiaojiao. Madame Xiao, the old lady, was just woken up. Upon hearing that the attendant came to her door, she intended to get up, but unexpectedly got out of bed and started vomiting. She had just taken all the medicine and had vomited it up. "I'm afraid Madame Xiao will go to receive it on her own." Sheer said with a sigh, "If the young lady thinks it's not appropriate, the old lady said she can invite the master to come along. However, the master has not yet stood up. If you go to call the master, you may have to keep the distinguished guest waiting for a long time." After speaking, Sheer stood respectfully with her head hanging down, as if waiting for Song Xiyue's reaction. Having received her words, Song Xiyue felt satisfied in her heart, but showed a hint of helplessness on her face. She said, "Since it's the old lady's intention, being a granddaughter should follow the orders of elders." After speaking, he quickly turned around and left Ning Xiaotong. After walking out for a while, Song Xiyue and Xiyue said, "Send someone to the Bai Chao Hall to invite a doctor to treat Mrs. Gu." "Yes." Ting Song Pavilion. Liang Zhoming had been waiting for a long time, drinking 2 cups of tea, but still couldn't see anyone, and his heart felt a bit restless. As soon as he stepped down from the court, he heard that Gu Xunyuan's wedding night was nowhere to be seen, and Gu Mansion was searching for people all over the city. At first, I listened to it as a piece of gossip, but as soon as I arrived at the Ministry of War, I met the eldest Prince Helanjun who had just returned to the capital. In the end, for some reason, I agreed to visit the Gu Mansion. As a result, he was left hanging here. At this moment, Liang Zhoming was already calculating in his heart what kind of small shoes to wear for Gu Xunyuan. I have seen Lord Liang before. It was the fault of the family to treat Lord Liang slowly. Please forgive me, Lord Liang. Just as Liang Zhoming was feeling down, a gentle female voice came into his ears. Chapter 4. Even if it gets too big, she becomes a widow the day after her wedding. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Following the sound, Song Xiyue and her maid stood at the door, bowing respectfully. Liang Zhoming immediately stood up with a puzzled expression on his face. Is there no one in the Gu family? How could you let a newly married woman come to treat guests? As he spoke, he quickly waved his hand and said, Get up, I'm also your elder. Just call me Uncle Liang. Yes, thank you very much, Uncle Liang. Song Xiyue only then stood up straight. Liang Zhoming frowned and said, Where are the elders of the Gu family? Song Xiyue lowered her eyes and said, I can't get up to bed with my hair in the wind. My father-in-law is drunk and hasn't woken up, General. Hasn't come back yet. After hearing these words, Liang Zhoming frowned even tighter and said, What's going on? Where exactly did Gu Xunyuan go? Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue's eyes turned slightly red and she shook her head gently. General, last night he only said there was an urgent military matter and hurriedly left. He has not sent any messages to the mansion yet. I have sent someone to search for him, but I don't know where he is. After seeing her like this, Liang Zhoming pondered for a moment and said, You are getting married. He has been on vacation for the past 7 days. If there is really an urgent military matter that he needs to handle, there should be a record in the Jingwei camp. But when I came, I checked and there wasn't anything urgent that happened last night. Did you remember correctly? Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue shook her head and said, It was the general's personal follower Jiang Xian who said it. Both I and the maid heard it. As she finished speaking, she suddenly paused and said, Uncle Liang, could something have happened? Liang Zhoming instinctively wanted to say impossible. But on second thought, it's not impossible either. The eldest Prince Helanjun returned to Beijing yesterday, and along the way, the North Barbarians relentlessly pursued him. It is uncertain that a few of them would have sneaked in. If Gu Xunyuan really pursued the Northern Barbarians last night, then if there is no news so far, he is likely dead. No wonder the Crown Prince wants him to come to Gu Mansion for this trip. Thinking of this, Liang Zhoming's face became serious and he said, Madame Gu's words are reasonable. This matter is not insignificant. I will send someone to investigate immediately. Song Xiyue was taken aback at the words. Why is it so insignificant? Gu Xunyuan has only been General Weiyuan for less than 2 months, and he has only been patrolling the capital for over a month. Is he so important? But she didn't show it, but immediately apologized, I thank Uncle Liang on behalf of the general. You're welcome. Liang Zhoming looked at Song Xiyue with mixed emotions. The young lady of the Song family, who was supposed to be married to the crown prince, should have married an unknown person. Unexpectedly, she became a widow the day after her wedding. What a pity. After seeing off Liang Zhoming, a servant immediately came to report that old Yin had arrived. Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue was very surprised. Yin Lao is a highly respected expert in the capital and has some connections with the Song family. Song Xiyue went to the 100 Grass Hall to invite him. She had originally planned to invite Yin Lao's disciple, but she didn't expect him to come in person. Xiyue advised her, "Miss, you're not feeling well yourself. Let the servant take Yin Lao to see the old lady, right?" Song Xiyue shook her head and said, "Yin Lao Qin has come since, I cannot neglect him. Moreover, if she doesn't go, Mrs. Gu may be willing to open the door of Ning Xiaodong." Song Xiyue's active efforts to hire a doctor for her were not about caring for her, but about demanding that the door of Ning Xiaodong be opened before the whole city was caught. Only in this way can we guarantee that the wild mandarin ducks in the west of the city will obediently resist the lingering love in their love nest, and not be disturbed. Seeing Yin Lao, Song Xiyue and others came to Ning Xiaodong again. As expected, the door remained tightly closed. Xiyue slammed hard on the door and said, "Madam, Madam has come to see you. Old lady, young lady heard that you have a bad headwind and specially invited the holy hand Yin Lao to open the door for you. Madam, it's about to rain outside. Please open the door." Within Ningshou Hall. Listening to the shouting outside, Mr. Gu was so angry that he almost tore off the string of high-quality jade and glass Buddha beads in his hand. "She's a Song Xiyue, an unruly slut. She won't force me to death today, will she? If it weren't for her seducing our brother Yuan and forcing him to marry, she wouldn't have been able to enter my Gu family gate. Now it's okay, there are no rules at all when you enter the door. You're still showing off your power to an old woman like me, a damn prostitute. You should have pulled her out, beaten her to death, and thrown her out." Shi supported Madame Gu and said, "Madam, calm down. As we mentioned before, you have fallen asleep. If Madame Xiao refuses to let go, when the general comes back, tell him to take care of her. Don't be angry with yourself." Upon hearing this, Mrs. Gu slammed the table fiercely in anger and pointed outside, cursing loudly, "Didn't you hear what that little prostitute said? She said they hired some kind of expert doctor to treat me. Where am I sick? It's getting better now. It's about to rain outside, and I can't get sick right away. As soon as the door to Ning Xiaodong opens, she will definitely come and ask me where brother Yuan has gone. What should I do? I was picked up by that little prostitute Song Xiyue." Speaking, Mrs. Gu hammered her chest, causing her head to feel stuffy with anger. Shi quickly calmed her down and said, "Old lady, young lady is still pregnant with a child. She wouldn't really let herself get wet." Mrs. Gu frowned and said, "You make sense, but what about that famous doctor outside?" Shi said in a slow voice, "That was invited by the young lady." "What's the matter with the old lady?" Seeing that Lady Gu still frowned, Shi said again, "Madam, the doctor can tell with just a pulse that you're not sick. When the young lady starts to stir up trouble, what can we do to inquire about your general's affairs?" Sure enough, upon hearing Shi's words, Lady Gu immediately frowned and said, "You're right, Shi. Go tell her that I don't see her and send her away. Don't let her bother me again before brother Yuan returns home. As for that doctor, I don't believe Song Xiyue has such a kind heart to hire me a famous doctor. You sent me 2 taels of silver, don't let anyone say I care about the family." Upon hearing these words, Shi responded and helped Mrs. Gu sit down before hurriedly leaving Ningshou Hall. "The sky is getting darker and darker, with dark clouds pressing on my head, making me feel a bit breathless." Song Xiyue waited for a while before Ning Xiaodong finally opened a crack in the door. Shi cautiously crawled out and walked over with a smiling face. "How is the old lady doing?" Shi lowered her head slightly and said, "The old lady is not sleeping steadily. The young lady, please don't make any more noise. The old lady's hair is not too tight, and she usually just needs to take a nap to recover. Don't bother the doctor." Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue sighed and said, "Then I'll come see the old lady again later." Shi quickly said, "Madam, what madam means is that you should take care of your own body more and not frequently come to Ningshou Hall." After hearing these words, Song Xiyue showed a worried expression and said, "Does madam mean she doesn't want to see me?" Upon hearing this, Shi lowered her head and remained silent. Just give me my regards, old man. Madam Xiao, please walk slowly. Leaving Ning Xiaodong, Song Xiyue invited Yin Lao to Tingsong Pavilion. Looking at the pouring rain outside, she felt extremely sorry and said, "It was really my fault that caused you to make this trip." Yin stroked his beard and put out a pulse pillow with a smile, saying, "We've all arrived, and we can't leave for now. It's the same for me to give you a pulse diagnosis." Upon hearing these words, Song Xiyue couldn't help but laugh and reached out her hand, saying, "I've caused you a lot of trouble since I was a child. I didn't expect to have to cause you trouble when I grow up. It's just a pulse diagnosis, it can't be considered troublesome." Yin Lao said, his 3 fingers touching her wrist vein. After a moment, he stroked his beard and said, "I've been tired these past 2 days of getting married. Your pulse is not very good, and you may experience redness when sitting in an unstable tire. You need to take a good rest for a while, and remember not to work hard and hurt your mind. It's great joy and sorrow." After speaking, Yin Lao opened a prescription and said, "Your Highness, the eldest prince, is coming to my place today. I find it annoying. I came to your place to hide and be quiet. Fortunately, I came. My disciple wasn't so careful." Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue pursed her lips and smiled, silently sitting on the side without speaking, watching Yin Lao write a prescription. Yin glanced at her several times, his face full of desire to speak. After the rain stopped, Song Xiyue sent someone to escort Yin Lao back to the 100-grass hall. At this moment, Mou and Baiyu also returned. The people of the Jingwei camp have already obtained the documents from the Ministry of War and are searching door-to-door with the Imperial City Department. Many people are spreading that Gu Xunyuan has already died. After listening to their words, Song Xiyue immediately said, "Baiyu, send a few clever people to Ningshou Hall to find a way to let Mrs. Gu know about the outside world. After I leave the mansion, I will lead her to search for the legitimate branch of the Gu family." "Miss, why did you disturb the legitimate branch of the Gu family?" Baiyu was puzzled. After all, the relationship between Gu Xunyuan and the legitimate branch of the Gu family is not very close. Song Xiyue shook her head slightly and said in a warm voice, "Why is the legitimate branch of the Gu family also one of the aristocratic families in Xinjiang? Of course, we need to invite them over to see how their only warrior of the Gu family has shamed themselves in front of the whole city." Chapter 5. In addition to his nickname, General Weiyuan was captured and raped by various people and horses in bed. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The head of the Gu family is Gu Wenyue, the current minister of the Imperial Secretariat, and the Gu Xunyuan branch is a collateral branch of the hometown of Nanyang. The Gu family has inherited poetry and books, and he is the only military general in the Gu family. In his past life, Gu Xunyuan disguised himself very well and had the Song family as his in-laws. The legitimate branch of the Gu family favored him greatly and was very supportive. Now, if Song Xiyue wants to ruin his path to the clouds, he will gradually make the legitimate branch of the Gu family despise him. Thinking of this, Song Xiyue pressed her heart. It was clear that she was her enemy, and for some reason, she felt a little anxious. Qingyu saw that her face was not good, so she quickly stepped forward. "Miss, are you feeling unwell again?" Song Xiyue shook her head and said, "When is it?" "Miss, it's already the end of time." After hearing these words, Song Xiyue calculated the time in her heart and immediately said, "Let's go to the west of the city." The disappearance of General Weiyuan on his wedding night has become well known, and the Imperial City Department and the Jingwei camp are leading people to patrol the city. We have searched both the east, south, and north of the city, but there are many merchants in the west, which is difficult to deal with. Therefore, the deputy envoy of the Imperial City Department, Zhou Mian, led the team and is currently gathering below the Jade Cuisine building. A carriage stopped in front of the Jade restaurant, and Mou jumped off the carriage and approached the leader, whispering a few words. "Miss Song. Zhou Mian raised her eyebrows and looked towards the direction of the carriage. Madame Gu, rest assured that whether General Weiyuan is dead or alive, Zhou will notify you as soon as possible and give you and the Song family an explanation. As the words fell, he turned his head and led the troops away. Zhou Mian's voice was full of energy. Even if he didn't deliberately listen, it was enough for everyone to hear what he was saying. Immediately, many eyes fell on the carriage. That's the bride of the Gu family. TSK, she just married and became a widow. What a pity. Who said it's not true? I heard that Miss Song and Empress Ji were supposed to marry the crown prince, but it turned out to be a short-lived ghost. Ah, how jealous of beauty. Miss Song has only won the crown in Xingjing, but now it's a pity. In the carriage, Song Xiyue leaned against a soft pillow with her eyes closed, listening to the commotion outside, but her face showed no reaction at all. As she speculated, the merchants in the west of the city were difficult to deal with, and it was the Imperial City Bureau who led the team to patrol inside. The Imperial City Department and the Jingwei camp have always looked down on each other, and Zhou Mian and Gu Xunyuan had many disagreements with each other on weekdays regarding the joint leadership of the Jingwei Guard. Only with him leading the team can things get bigger. Biyu sat on the side, listening to the constant chatter outside, feeling even more worried. Miss, are you planning to take this opportunity to leave? Song Xiyue didn't open her eyes and said in a faint tone, I won't leave. I just want to lose my husband. Upon hearing this, the jade was about to say something when the car curtain was lifted and Mou crawled in. Miss, Sister Qingyu has sent a message. Mrs. Gu has gone to the residence of the Secretary of State and is now heading towards the west of the city with her. Calculating the time, she will soon arrive at the Jade restaurant. As Mou spoke, a hint of excitement flickered in his eyes. Vice Minister Zhou of the Imperial City has just returned, and he told me that there are only 4 courtyards left. Let's go over now, and the timing is just right. Mou, Song Xiyue opened her eyes and sat up straight, you go and add some fire to make this matter more intense. Yes. As Mou got off the car, Song Xiyue bent her finger and knocked on the car wall, saying, enter the west of the city. At this moment, inside the small courtyard. When Zhou Mian and his companions rushed in, they saw the altar placed in the courtyard, with big red letters of happiness pasted everywhere, and red lanterns hanging on the eaves, creating a festive atmosphere. Sir, General Weiyuan and a woman are sleeping soundly in the room, having sex and embracing each other. There is also a pair of dragon and phoenix candles burning in the room, said Gu Xunyuan in a low voice as the Imperial City Minister approached. After hearing these words, Zhou Mian couldn't help but frown and say, so disgusting. Gu Xunyuan said again, it's quite disgusting, but sir, the Jingwei camp will come over soon. They want to protect who we can't stop. But if we take down that woman, can we also have an explanation from the Crown Prince? Vice Minister Zhou. Before Zhou Mian could speak, Song Xiyue's voice came from behind. He turned his head and saw her wearing a curtain hat, walking with the help of a maid. I've heard that this is the last place that hasn't been searched. I wonder if there's any news about my husband. Upon hearing this, Zhou Mian couldn't help but touch her nose and said, Miss Song, you'd better wait outside to avoid being bumped into. After speaking, he tugged hard at Gu Xunyuan. Gu Xunyuan looked at him with a puzzled expression, eager for knowledge. Sir, isn't my proposal just now good? Zhou Mian. Who dared to act recklessly on my general's head? You're not going to die. As he was planning to personally send Song Xiyue out, he only heard Gu Xunyuan's angry cries and the panicked screams of the woman coming from inside the room. I haven't waited for Zhou Mian's reaction yet. As soon as I looked up, a group of people surged in from outside the door. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be Lady Zhongshu. At this moment, Zhou Mian only wants to give Gu Xunyuan some wax. Where is the bride of the Gu family? As soon as Lady Zhongshu entered the door, the old lady beside her shouted out with great anger. Song Xiyue, with a pale face, was about to bow when she saw Lady Gu angrily tugging at her hat and slapping her face with a slap. "Little prostitute, you're a troublemaker. Who sent you here?" Bu reacted extremely quickly and stopped Mrs. Gu's hand, shouting angrily, "Please take care of yourself, Mrs. Gu. It's reversed. It's reversed." Mrs. Gu shouted loudly, "Even a dowager dares to fight against me, the master. Is that the way the Song family teaches?" Shouting, she was about to turn her head and ask Lady Zhongshu to take charge of her and punish Song Xiyue harshly when she looked up and saw a naked man staggering out of the room. Gu Xunyuan's eyes were red, his body was bare, and he was holding an unknown sword in his hand, forcing the people of the Imperial City Department out of the room. "Husband!" Song Xiyue immediately raised her voice and shouted, helping Gu Xunyuan attract the attention of countless people. Upon hearing this sound, Gu Xunyuan realized that the small courtyard was already filled with people. "Husband, why do you look like this?" Song Xiyue asked, "Where is this? Why are there so many red silk characters hanging all over it?" She said, moving forward step by step, and quickly crossed Zhou Mian. "Didn't you tell me last night that there was an emergency military service? How could you be here?" As her words fell, the room was also naked, sitting on the bed with a blanket, and the frightened woman fell into Song Xiyue's sight. She was shocked and turned pale in an instant. She stumbled back half a step and raised her hand to point into the room, looking at Gu Xunyuan and questioning, "Who is she? Why are you two naked?" At the moment when the words fell, Song Xiyue felt 2 lines of clear tears perfectly. Zhou Mian beside couldn't help but add fire. "Miss Song, can't you understand? Do you want me to explain something to you? General Gu had a wedding with that woman in this small courtyard last night, and there were still traces of joy on both of them." Chapter 6. On the wedding night, running to sleep in the northern barbarians and doing fine work. What should the general explain? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhou Mian, please shut up. Gu Xunyuan was extremely panicked, and as he was about to step forward with a furious rebuke, he suddenly remembered that he was not in touch. He looked anxiously at Song Xiyue and said, "Ayue, I'll go back and put on some clothes to explain to you." Song Xiyue remained silent and lay on the side of Bu's shoulder, sobbing softly. Upon seeing this, Zhou Mian on the side immediately signaled to the people of the Imperial City Department to follow into the room. "Zhou Mian, what are you doing?" Gu Xunyuan's voice was filled with embarrassment and frustration. However, Zhou Mian had a relaxed expression on her face and leaned against the door with both hands clasped around her chest, saying, "The Imperial City Bureau is handling the case, capturing the northern barbarians." As he spoke, he lifted his chin and said, "It's the one in your room." Absurdity. Gu Xunyuan pulled his clothes over his body and said, "She's just an ordinary woman, not a meticulous one. You ask your people to withdraw, don't insult her innocence. Can General Gu guarantee her?" Zhou Mian smiled as she watched Gu Xunyuan put on his pants. "Yes, General, I'm on bail. Quickly ask your people to withdraw." Upon hearing his words, Zhou Mian clapped her hands and said, "Hey guys, General Gu's guarantee is not a meticulous matter. Let's go guard at the door. If there's any mistake, General Gu will also be responsible. Let's leave now." Gu Xunyuan. What do you mean by Zhou Mian? What does it mean? What does it mean that even if there is a difference, this general is also responsible? Didn't you guarantee her? Gu Xunyuan looked at Zhou Mian angrily, but couldn't say a word. After holding it back for a while, he could only utter the word, "roll." Not long after, the door reopened. Wearing clothes, Gu Xunyuan and Bai Jiaojiao walked out one after another. At this moment, Song Xiyue had put on her veil again to cover her face, but the occasional sobs at that time were heartbreaking. Gu Xunyuan stood in front of Bai Jiaojiao and bowed to Lady Zhongshu and Lady Gu, saying, Auntie, grandmother, Jiang Xian came to report last night that there is an urgent matter in the Jingwei camp. After leaving the city, I stumbled over a horse rope and was drugged by thieves. No one knows, but when I woke up, it was now. I was calculated by someone. Speaking, Gu Xunyuan looked at Song Xiyue on the side and said, Ayue, you have to believe me. Song Xiyue sobbed twice and asked with a tearful tone, since that's the case, how do you plan to place this girl? Will she be brought into the mansion or? Gu Xunyuan immediately said, I will give her a sum of silver as compensation, and then send her away from a distance. Upon hearing this, Zhou Mian immediately said, let me interject a sentence. General Gu, as you said, you were ambushed by the northern barbarians last night, but when you woke up, you had sex with this woman and embraced her. So, before this woman can clear the suspicion of meticulous work, she needs to cooperate with the Imperial City Department's investigation and cannot leave Xinjing. After speaking, Zhou Mian raised her hand and the people from the Imperial City Department immediately stepped forward and pressed Bai Jiaojiao to the ground. Zhou Mian, you're reckless. Gu Xunyuan was extremely angry. You and I are of the same generation, who is being reckless? Zhou Mian rolled her eyes. All right. Lady Xia of the Imperial Secretariat couldn't help but speak, what are you making such a fuss about? After speaking, she pointed her chin at Bai Jiaojiao and said, what's your name and why is it here? Bai Jiaojiao was being held down by the people of the Imperial City Department and trembled at the words. My name is Bai Jiaojiao, I. What are you, me? Speak up. Zhou Mian scolded. Bai Jiaojiao trembled with fear, unable to utter a word. Madame Zhongshu gave her a disgusted glance and turned her head to look at Song Xiyue. Don't worry, the Gu family is determined not to let you suffer any injustice. I have already sent someone to fetch the extinct heir soup. After taking a bowl of medicine, there is no possibility that she will leave behind any more evil seeds. Upon hearing these words, before Song Xiyue could react, she heard Gu Xunyuan exclaim in shock, Auntie, no way. Why not? Madame Zhongshu glared at him and said, do you still want the northern barbarians to work hard and give birth to your child? I said, she's not a Bai meticulous worker. Upon hearing this, Zhou Mian exclaimed in surprise, General Gu's words are quite strange. You said you don't recognize this woman, so how can you be certain that she wasn't carefully crafted by the northern barbarians? Gu Xunyuan remained silent again, glaring angrily at Zhou Mian, unable to speak for a long time. Alright, stop making noise. Mrs. Zhongshu said, is it because the northern barbarians are meticulous? There has been an investigation and ruling by the Imperial City Department, but she must drink this bowl of extinct offspring soup today. No way. Gu Xunyuan clenched his fist and said, Auntie, she is innocent. According to the rules, unless the legitimate wife has nothing to do, you must not have any illegitimate or extramarital children before Xie gives birth to her legitimate eldest son. As she spoke, Lady Zhongshu gave an order. Go, pour medicine. Wait a minute. Mrs. Gu stood up and stopped in front of her. Madame Zhongshu looked at her discontentedly and said, what do you mean? Madame Gu leaned over to Madame Zhongshu and whispered, Song Xiyue has been pregnant for 2 months now, and the fetus is not firmly seated. She dare not speak out. Even if this woman were to conceive today, she would not be the eldest son. This is not considered breaking the rules. After speaking, she looked at Song Xiyue with a displeased expression on her face and said, if you don't speak up yet, do you want my Gu family bloodline to be killed? A sentence of being killed made Lady Zhongshu furious and said coldly, so it seems that I have become a bad person. Mrs. Gu was completely unaware and thought she was angry with Song Xiyue. Isn't it just her who is causing bad intentions? Madame Zhongshu ignored her and looked at Song Xiyue, saying, how did you plan?
If this woman is not carefully crafted by the northern barbarians, would you be willing to let her enter the palace as a concubine? Song Xiyue turned her head to look at Gu Xunyuan. Ayue, I treat you sincerely, you have to trust me. After hearing these words, Song Xiyue sighed and said, Madam, my husband doesn't want to take a concubine, and I don't want to force him either. Give her a bowl of extinct air soup, and after the Imperial City Bureau finds out her identity, give her a sum of silver and send her away from Xingjing. After speaking, she didn't wait for anyone else to speak before saying, Let this silver come out of my dowry. Upon hearing this, Lady Zhongshu sighed and her eyes were filled with tenderness, saying, Why do you need to? Ayue. Gu Xunyuan raised his voice and said, How could you do that? I disagree. Shut up. Madame Zhongshu glared at him angrily. She has done enough face for you. Don't give your face away. This statement was already very unpleasant, and Gu Xunyuan's face immediately became extremely ugly. Seeing this, Zhou Mian smiled and said, Okay, then we'll take the person to the Imperial City Department for interrogation. After speaking, he will take the person. But Gu Xunyuan pushed him away with force and gritted his teeth, saying, Try moving her. General Weiyuan, is this a blush when angry at Guan? Zhou Mian's smile faded and he said, You must think carefully. What you are protecting may be the meticulous work of the northern barbarians. I said, She's not. Gu Xunyuan gritted his teeth. At this moment, the Lady Zhongshu on the side couldn't help but say, Gu Erlang, you have always been certain that this woman is not a delicate work of the northern barbarians, but you have known her before. Chapter 7. Brother Yuan. Retire Song Xiyue, this wicked woman. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. Gu Xunyuan was speechless. But he couldn't watch as Bai Jiaojiao was taken away by the Imperial City Department. He was well aware that once she joined the Imperial City Department, whether she could survive or not was uncertain. Their child would definitely not be able to be saved. Anyway, she's not a Bai meticulous worker. Gu Xunyuan gritted his teeth and uttered these few words. At this moment, a few people hurriedly ran in from outside and whispered a few words to Zhou Mian. Zhou Mian smiled a bit and said, No wonder General Gu insists that this woman is not a meticulous work of the northern barbarians. As he spoke, his gaze drifted towards Song Xiyue and then onto Mrs. Gu's face, saying, So this courtyard belongs to Mr. Gu. What? Song Xiyue was surprised. This is something she never knew. Zhou Mian dusted off her robe and clasped fists with Lady Zhongshu and Song Xiyue, saying, The people of the Imperial City Department have visited the surrounding area and confirmed that this woman has been living here for over a month. General Gu, why did a woman of unknown origin stay in the courtyard under Mr. Gu's name for so long? Also, I really don't understand. Last night, you were ambushed by Bai Jiaojiao. If this woman wasn't Bai Jiaojiao, why was Bai Jiaojiao so kind? Not only did he send you here, but he also arranged a happy room for the two of them. Gu Xunyuan didn't expect these to be dug out, and when he looked down at them, his face turned iron blue and he said, Zhou. Crown. The deputy envoy is here. You shut up. I find it difficult to close my mouth. If it weren't for this moment, Gu Xunyuan would have really wanted to draw his sword and kill Zhou Mian. The middle-aged lady beside her heard this and didn't understand anything else. She looked at Mrs. Gu and said, What does this mean? Mrs. Gu panicked and said, I don't know either. Did your grandparents and grandchildren play with my wife, right? Mrs. Zhongshu chuckled angrily. Alright, that's great. You came to my mansion and insisted that I accompany you on this trip. You said Song Xiyue was arrogant and bullied you, and I pitied your age. I wanted to accompany you on this trip, but I didn't expect you to treat me like a fool. Mr. Gu was completely panicked and said, I really didn't, and I didn't know it was like this. Someone, go back to the mansion.
Madame Zhongshu was so angry that she shook her sleeves and turned around to leave. Mrs. Gu caught up with her for a few steps, but was stopped by the servants of the Central Secretariat. She could only watch helplessly as Mrs. Gu left. She turned around and stormed toward Song Xiyue in an uncontrollable anger, saying, "You scumbag, I'll kill you today, you troublemaker." Zhou Mian, who was quick-witted, grabbed Mrs. Gu's collar. Song Xiyue looked at her and said, "It's not me who hides beauty in the golden house. It's not me who slept with others on our wedding night. Why are you hitting me? Are you blaming me just because your grandson's scandal was exposed?" Upon hearing this, Mrs. Gu screamed in a sharp voice, "If it weren't for you sending someone out to search for brother Yuan, how could outsiders have known about his absence from the mansion? The old lady called me over early in the morning to serve tea, so naturally I had to send someone out to find my husband." Song Xiyue said, "If it weren't for the old lady's refusal to personally stand up to receive Lord Liang, the Ministry of War wouldn't have known that her husband hadn't returned all night, let alone suspected that it was related to the meticulous work of the northern barbarians." After hearing these words, Mrs. Gu became even more angry and said, "Shut up. Shut up." She felt both anger and regret in her heart. It's all because of Song Xiyue. It was she who took down Zhao Mama, and Lady Gu was worried that she knew from Zhao Mama that Gu Xunyuan's affairs were entangled with her, so she ordered the door of Ning Xiaotong to be closed. When Lord Liang, the Minister of War, came to the door, Lady Gu had a desire to embarrass Song Xiyue, which forced her to go and receive him herself. She didn't expect it to turn into the current situation. She didn't expect things to get so big. She never expected to offend Lady Zhongshu, the legitimate branch of the Gu family, because of this. It's all because of Song Xiyue. Brother Yuan, take care of her. Take care of this wicked woman. Mrs. Gu tightly grasped Gu Xunyuan's arm and looked at Song Xiyue with crimson eyes. Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue turned her head to look at Gu Xunyuan and said, "Do you want to divorce your wife on the second day of your wedding?" Being stared at by the two, Gu Xunyuan felt his head as big as a fight. "Ayue, I only have you in my heart, and I will never divorce my wife." Zhou Mian, who was enjoying watching the play on the side, quickly lit the fire and said, "Is Mr. Gu planning to take a concubine on the second day of his wedding?" Gu Xunyuan glared at him and said, "Vice Minister Zhou, this is my general's family matter. Please retreat first." "No," Zhou Mian chuckled, "this woman's identity is unknown. General Gu, you did indeed encounter Bai Jiaojiao outside the city. This matter has arisen, and you two still need to accompany this deputy envoy to the Imperial City Office to cooperate with the investigation." After his words fell, the people from the Imperial City Department immediately took 2 steps forward, indicating a clear intention of capturing Bai Jiaojiao. Killing. The Imperial City Bureau is trying to force us Gu's family to death. Mrs. Gu was used to throwing things in the countryside and immediately sat down on the ground, howling. The Imperial City Department is best at dealing with people like Changji. Gao Shanming immediately drew his sword and pointed it at her, scolding, "Those who hinder the handling of cases by the Imperial City Department will be taken down and thrown into prison." Upon seeing this, Gu Xunyuan looked at Mrs. Gu impatiently and said, "Grandmother, don't make trouble at this moment." Upon hearing this, Mrs. Gu's crying suddenly came to an end. Song Xiyue watched this scene and felt extremely happy in her heart. Before entering the west of the city, she specifically asked Mou to leave, calculating the time to lead the people of the Jingwei camp away. At this moment, Gu Xunyuan could only face Zhou Mian and others alone, which could be described as a solitary tree that was difficult to support and constrained on all sides. In her past life, Mrs. Gu protected Bai Jiaojiao and Sheer. Whenever Song Xiyue said something that made her unhappy, she would cry and make a fuss. Gu Xunyuan held filial piety and asked Song Xiyue to shut up. "Today I want to see how arrogant these grandparents and grandchildren are. Since my husband is reluctant to let this girl join the Imperial City Department, let's take her to the mansion as a concubine. Song Xiyue spoke softly. Ayue. Gu Xunyuan's eyes showed a hint of emotion and he said, don't speak ill of me. I will never take a concubine. Everyone was pressuring him, but Song Xiyue was so gentle and understanding. Even though he didn't want Bai Jiaojiao to be his concubine, at this moment, he couldn't help but be moved by Song Xiyue's purity and kindness. Song Xiyue ignored him and walked up to Bai Jiaojiao, saying in a slow voice, where are you from? Upon hearing the words, Bai Jiaojiao did not look up or answer. Song Xiyue remained calm and continued, if you don't say anything, how can I help you? Upon hearing these words, Bai Jiaojiao's fists clenched even tighter. The person from the Imperial City Bureau on the side saw the situation and kicked her. Mute. Speak up. Stop it. Gu Xunyuan hurriedly protected Bai Jiaojiao and then glared at the person angrily, she is pregnant, dare you touch her? This statement shocked everyone. Only Song Xiyue finally had a smile in her eyes. Oh. General Gu cares so much, do you know the father of the child? Zhou Mian raised an eyebrow on the side. Gu Xunyuan's rationality, which could still be preserved under layers of pressure, completely cracked when he saw the crimson dots under Bai Jiaojiao's body. He disregarded everything and picked up Bai Jiaojiao horizontally, glaring angrily at Zhou Mian. He said sternly, she has the blood of this general in her belly. Zhou Mian, if there are any ups and downs between their mother and son, this general will take your life. Chapter 8. You have everything, what can she do? You are listening at novelfull.audio. What are you saying? Song Xiyue lost her voice and asked a question. Gu Xunyuan finally regained his senses. He turned his head to look at her and said in a panic, Ayue, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have kept it from you, but Jiao did meet me many years ago. This courtyard was originally arranged by my grandmother for our marriage, that's why she lives here. If it weren't for the accident 2 months ago, I would have planned to marry her, but I dare not confront the Song family. I'm afraid I'll implicate her. Speaking, Gu Xunyuan shed 2 lines of tears. He tightly embraced Bai Jiaojiao in his arms and looked at Song Xiyue with a pleading expression in his eyes. Ayue, you come from a noble background and have been pampered by your family since childhood. You are ignorant of human suffering and have a strong Song family as a support. You have everything. But Jiao is an orphan girl. She followed me when she was 13 years old, and I can't be a heartless person. Ayue, Quandang is for me, please soften your heart once. Zhou Mian on the side felt really uncomfortable after hearing these shameless words. He had intended to say something, but Song Xiyue sneered beside him. Gu Xunyuan, why didn't I know before that your mouth was so eloquent? She said, lowered her eyes, took a deep breath, and said, Jade, let the people in the mansion pack up. Let's go back to the Song family. Yes. At this point, Song Xiyue's goal for today has been largely achieved. She had already torn open a corner of Gu Xunyuan's hypocritical mask, leaving only the step of getting Bai Jiaojiao into the Gu family. But she was well aware that the Song family was still strong for a day, and she was still healthy for a day. Gu Xunyuan couldn't bear to let Bai Jiaojiao be his concubine. Don't force Gu Xunyuan, Bai Jiaojiao is afraid to escape smoothly today. Ayue. Gu Xunyuan heard that she was going back to the Song family, and immediately panicked. He released Bai Jiaojiao, who was delicate and weak in his arms, and got up to catch up with Song Xiyue, blocking her path. We have already worshipped heaven and earth, and everyone in the bustling capital knows that you are already the wife of the Gu family. If you go back to the Song family like this, how will the Song family face? Song Xiyue raised her bright red eyes and stared at him intently, filled with genuine resentment, causing Gu Xunyuan to take a step back. So what do you want? After hearing these words, Gu Xunyuan seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, and a deep expression appeared on his face. Ayue,
I just want you to let go of Jiao and pretend that you haven't noticed what happened today, isn't it okay? What about the child in her womb? Song Xiyue asked again. Upon hearing her question, Gu Xunyuan felt even softer in his heart. He sighed and said, "It's always my child. After he's born, I'll take him back to the mansion and write him down under your name. You'll raise him." Listening to his words became increasingly shameless, and Zhou Mian on the side couldn't help it anymore. "I said, General Gu, you can't think Miss Song is easy to talk about and just take such a step forward, can you? I want to keep my mistress under my wife's name and raise her, but I'm glad you came up with such a wicked idea. It's shameless." For his words, Gu Xunyuan turned a deaf ear and instead fixed his gaze on Song Xiyue. He knew that Song Xiyue was a simple woman, and coupled with her betrayal to him, she was rightfully at the forefront. Moreover, she was still carrying his flesh and blood in her belly, so he only comforted her with a warm voice, not afraid that she wouldn't nod. "As for the Song family, as long as we deal with her, she won't pursue her anymore. What else can the Song family say?" Husband, Song Xiyue seemed to have been entangled for a long time, during which she secretly pinched her thigh before lifting her hazy tearful eyes to look at Gu Xunyuan. "Vice Minister Zhou is right. You are indeed taking advantage of your situation." As she spoke, she pointed to Bai Jiaojiao leaning in Mrs. Gu's arms and choked up, saying, "Either she goes to the mansion as a concubine, or she drinks the extinction soup and leaves Xingjing. Before that, I still have to go to the Imperial City office for investigation," said Zhou Mian on the sidelines. Gu Xunyuan ignored Zhou Mian and looked at Song Xiyue calmly. "Are you really trying to force me?" "You're forcing me," Song Xiyue said. "I've been back and forth, and I didn't even ask her to leave the child before entering the mansion. Husband, I really have to back down so much that I can't back down anymore." After speaking, Song Xiyue's tears had already been drained from her eyes. She quickly leaned on the shoulder of Biyu and began to sob. Seeing her like this, Gu Xunyuan was filled with anger and didn't know where to send it. "I could only kick the stone lamp beside me fiercely." Upon seeing this, Zhou Mian impatiently said, "General Gu, how long will it take to handle your family matters? It's time for this deputy envoy to take you and your mistress back to the Imperial City office for duty." After hearing these words, Gu Xunyuan looked at him with a fierce expression on his face and said, "General," I said, "she's not a meticulous worker from the northern barbarians. My deputy envoy has also said that the Imperial City Department the final say if the northern barbarians are careful." Zhou Mian pulled down her face. Upon seeing this, Gu Xunyuan wiped his face and looked at Song Xiyue. "Can't you really think about it for me?" Song Xiyue lay on Biyu's shoulder without answering, but Biyu was quite angry. "General, let's see what we've done. If Miss is willing to let her enter the mansion, she should thank Miss for her kindness." Upon hearing this, Gu Xunyuan seemed to have been completely angered and was about to go and catch Song Xiyue. However, the Song family passed down their lineage through martial arts, and with the agility of the jade, they avoided Song Xiyue to the side. The people of the Imperial City Bureau rushed forward and protected their master and servants behind them. Zhou Mian stood in front of Gu Xunyuan and said sternly, "General Gu, are you going to perform a dog jumping over a wall in front of the Imperial City Department?" As he spoke, he seemed to have lost patience and ordered, "Someone, take General Weiyuan and Northern Barbarians down. Take them to the Imperial City Department." "Yes." After the crowd responded, Zhou Mian led the way and formed a team with Gu Xunyuan. Mrs. Gu screamed on the side, tightly embracing Bai Jiaojiao in her arms. Gao Shanming and others rushed forward, pulled Mrs. Gu aside and pressed her on the ground several times, and tied Bai Jiaojiao's mouth into fried dough twists. Song Xiyue lifted her eyes from the jade shoulder. When she saw Lady Gu with disheveled hair and disheveled clothes, as if she were a madwoman, she couldn't help but curl her lips. Looking at Bai Jiaojiao's pale face over there, stuffed into her throat with a stinky cloth and bound into maggots, her heart became even more joyful. When her gaze fell on Gu Xunyuan, who had been beaten back and embarrassed by Zhou Mian, Song Xiyue curved her eyebrows and eyes. Don't worry, your good days have just begun. Accompanied by Gu Xunyuan's muffled groans, Zhou Mian's long sword pressed against his throat. He looked down at Gu Xunyuan from a high position and said with a faint smile, General Weiyuan, I'll accept it. Take it down. After the people of the Imperial City Department took Gu Xunyuan and Bai Jiaojiao away, Zhou Mian walked up to Song Xiyue and clasped his fists in salute. Miss Song, do you need to explain to me? He squeezed his eyes and hinted. After a moment of silence, Song Xiyue shook her head lightly and said, Thank you very much for Vice Minister Zhou's kindness. Now that the relationship between Gu Xunyuan and Bai Jiaojiao has been exposed, if Zhou Mian helps her get rid of the child in Bai Jiaojiao's belly, wouldn't she be missing an enemy with her own blood blade? Upon hearing these words, Zhou Mian looked a bit puzzled, but when she caught a glimpse of Lady Gu, who was looking dementia beside her, she nodded and said, Miss Song, rest assured that all those who enter the Imperial City office will go through torture. Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue couldn't help but say, Vice Minister Zhou, the woman surnamed Bai has a child in her womb. Please protect her. Ah. Zhou Mian stared in confusion, why? Song Xiyue glanced at Lady Gu, who had already raised her ears, and bent her knees in a half salute. She said sternly, My husband loves that woman surnamed Bai very much, and I don't want him to be sad. Later, I will ask the doctor to go to the Imperial City office to protect her pregnancy. I earnestly request Vice Minister Zhou to complete it. Upon hearing these words, Zhou Mian's mood became complicated. I want to curse. I have always known that Miss Song is gentle, kind, and pure. But never expected that she would be a fool. Chapter 9. Whose sister is this? You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Following the person escorted by the Imperial City Bureau, Song Xiyue left the courtyard together. As for Mrs. Gu, she seemed to have forgotten and didn't even give any extra look. The alleyway outside the small courtyard was surrounded by the people, watching as Gu Xunyuan and Bai Jiaojiao, who had been taken down by the Imperial City Bureau, were discussing. That's General Weiyuan. Didn't he die at the hands of Bai Jiaojiao? What you've heard is all the old gossip from an hour ago. Let me tell you, General Weiyuan ran out last night to have sex with someone. Yes, I've heard about it too. When the Imperial City Bureau found him, he was still having sex with that woman. It was really explosive. Stop talking, my ears are getting dirty. If you don't like listening, go ahead and talk more. I love listening. The voices of discussion around him kept ringing in the ears of Gu Xunyuan and Bai Jiaojiao. Bai Jiaojiao was gagged and unable to defend herself, but Gu Xunyuan did not. He roared and yelled all the way, insulting Zhou Mian crazily, with no image at all. Many people looked at his moral character, and even as they looked at Song Xiyue coming out not far away, their eyes showed a hint of pity and regret. Zhou Mian, when I went to battle to kill the enemy, you were bullying in the capital. Aren't you afraid of the general's coldness when you treated them like this? Gu Xunyuan shouted and cursed, full of anger. Zhou Mian, who had originally turned a deaf ear, suddenly stopped walking upon hearing these words. He turned to look at Gu Xunyuan with a mocking expression in his eyes and said, as a collateral branch of the Gu family, General Gu would say such a thing. I, the deputy envoy, will definitely visit the residence of Lord Zhongshu another day. Ask him if this is the Gu family's family motto. Thief, you're shameless. Am I shameless? Zhou Mian sneered lightly, you climbed onto the high branch of Miss Song's school and won the military merit of General Song's division to promote you to the 5th rank of Weiyuan General. But what about you? Not only did you have a close relationship with a woman who seemed to be a northern barbarian on your wedding night, Zigoha, in front of Miss Song, refused to let the woman drink the extinction soup, and even wanted the woman to have a child and have Miss Song raise her as her legitimate son. Gu Xunyuan, compared to you,
all the dishonest people in the world combined are not as shameless as you. Listening to his words, Gu Xunyuan hissed to him to shut up, but Zhou Mian seemed to have not heard him. Until he finished speaking, he kicked Gu Xunyuan on the chin and said with a calm face, "When I found you, you still slept soundly in that woman's body. It's so disgusting that even I wish I didn't have these eyes." With one foot down, Gu Xunyuan felt pain and was about to curse something, but Song Xiyue quickly walked up. She looked at Gu Xunyuan with a pale face and a disappointed expression on her face. "Don't talk," she said, "Ayue." Song Xiyue ignored him and instead bowed to Zhou Mian, bowing and saying, "Vice Minister Zhou, I will take the doctor to the imperial city office later to protect the woman's pregnancy. I also ask Lord Zhou to fulfill it." Zhou Mian was already cursed so fiercely that she let out a cold snort upon hearing these words. Miss Song really has boundless love. After speaking, turn around and leave. Song Xiyue stood up straight, with red eyes as she watched Gu Xunyuan and Bai Jiaojiao being dragged away by Lian Tuo, and lightly pressed the corner of her eye. Before Biyu could speak, a kind-hearted mother-in-law handed over a candy cake. "Miss Song, when you're feeling sad, eating something sweet will make you feel better." Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue's nose turned sour, and tears suddenly fell from her eyes. Seeing her like this, my mother-in-law sighed and said, "Most men are promiscuous. General Gu's coldness is truly chilling, but you can still think of preserving his bloodline. I think it must be extremely painful in your heart. As both women, I know you suffer. After all, after getting married, where can you let yourself go?" Upon hearing these words, Song Xiyue couldn't help but shed tears. She took the candy cake with both hands and bent her knees to thank her. "Thank you very much. Good child, don't cry." Returning to the carriage, Song Xiyue held sugar cakes in both hands and ate them in small bites. Eating while shedding tears. Moyu, who had just returned, saw her so sad that she was so angry that she wished she could catch up and twist Gu Xunyuan's head off. Biyu sat on the side silently wiping away her tears. They couldn't understand why their young lady was so accommodating, but they knew that no matter what the young lady did, they had to support her. After finishing a piece of sugar cake, Song Xiyue's tears gradually faded. She sniffed and said, "Let's go to the Baikatang." "Miss, do you really want to give that woman an abortion?" Mou frowned and disagreed. "Yes." Song Xiyue lowered her eyes and caressed her lower abdomen with one hand, taking a deep breath. "Let's just consider it a blessing for my child." "But..." Mou wanted to say, but was pulled by Biyu. "Mou," Song Xiyue restrained her mind and said, "Later, you can sneak back to the small courtyard in the west of the city and carefully search for any objects related to that Bai Jiaojiao's identity. If you find something suspicious, quietly bring it back and don't let anyone notice." In her past life, she had suspected that Bai Jiaojiao's behavior were not like ordinary women, and her identity must have had a different background. But due to the fact that there was no one around her at that time and she was bedridden, I couldn't figure out her identity, only knowing that she was an orphan. Today, Song Xiyue caught her off guard and couldn't let it go. Upon hearing this, Mou was momentarily taken aback, then immediately responded seriously and quietly got off the carriage before it turned off the main road. After seeing off Mou, Song Xiyue leaned back on a soft pillow. Biyu raised her hand and tidied up Song Xiyue's somewhat messy hair bun, saying softly, "Miss, Sister Qingyu has been waiting in the 100-grass hall. She has sent someone to bring news. Yin Lao has learned about this and is willing to go with you to the imperial city office." Upon hearing these words, Song Xiyue almost shed tears again. Bai Chao Tang. Yin Lao's face remained heavy as he watched Song Xiyue walk in with a pale face. He let out a heavy hum and then put out a pulse pillow. "Reach out." Song Xiyue obediently reached out her hand and put it up. Yin frowned and felt his pulse. After a while, he scolded, "Didn't I tell you to avoid overwork and great joy and sorrow? Don't you want the child in your belly anymore? Song Xiyue hesitated for a moment but didn't speak. Even if you don't want this child, don't you want your own body anymore? Yin Lao glared at her and said, don't tell me, you married the wrong person and don't even want to live. Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue pursed her lips and shook her head in grievance, I just don't want others to laugh at the Song family anymore. I thought, I have made the Song family a joke. I must show the grace of a lady from a wealthy family and not let others mock my Song family daughter as a jealous fool. I want others to think that Gu Xunyuan is sorry for me, and I have done nothing wrong from beginning to end. The more she talks, the more sad she becomes. Seeing her like this, Yin Lao angrily said, you didn't do anything wrong. Upon hearing this, Song Xiyue choked up. Faced with the old man who watched her grow up, her grievances poured out like a torrent. During the 8 years she married Gu Xunyuan in her previous life, she was poisoned and bedridden for 7 years, imprisoned and humiliated for 3 years, and became a ghost for 2 more years after her death, unable to do anything. 10 years of hatred left her with no leisure to feel wronged even if she was reborn and returned. She just wants revenge. She just wanted to firmly bind Gu Xunyuan, Bai Jiaojiao, and Gu Zhili together, and repay the pain they had inflicted on the Song family in their past lives, one by one. Whose sister is this? Why is she crying like this? A voice with a third husky voice came over. Immediately after, Song Xiyue noticed a hand pressing on her shoulder and said, how old are you? You're crying so ugly. Upon hearing this voice, Song Xiyue immediately felt a chill in her heart. She suddenly turned her head to look at the newcomer, tears swirling in mid-air. Brother Zishu. Helanjun raised his hand to wipe away the tears from her cheeks, then reached out and flicked her forehead. It's not proper, call the Crown Prince His Highness. Brother Zishu. Song Xiyue's last shred of rationality collapsed as she held on to Helanjun's hand tightly, tears welling up in her eyes as she said, Brother Zishu, Brother Zishu. Alright, it's not up to you anymore. You can call it whatever you like, okay. Helanjun sighed and simply pulled up his sleeve, covering her face. Don't cry, you're already a 15-year-old girl, crying as ugly as when you were a child, he said, don't use my sleeves to wipe my nose. Chapter 10. I'm not crying for him, but for you. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This translator is experiencing an error, please try another translator.